I think one of the most important pieces of feedback I have ever received as a manager, which I also still think about to this day, came from one of my reports. We were working on a project together and it was very stressful. And it was like, a top CEO company mandate. And we were having like reviews almost on the daily. And I was talking to him about the work. And, I think I had this tone, I had this attitude of like, hey, we got to do better. We got to do this or that. And he stopped me and said, Julie, I know that you care a lot about this project. And I also know that's very stressful for all of us. But sometimes I feel that, when things are good, you're on my side, you're supporting me. But when things are not going well, I don't feel like you're on my side. I don't feel that you're the kind of person who is there for me. And he expressed this sentiment to me, which really made me pause and actually reflect much more on like, wait, what is my job here as a manager? And what I realized is that it's not really the kind of manager that I want to be. We all know that obviously results matter. And part of the job is like you want to get great results from the team. But I didn't want to do it in a way where the people I was supporting felt like I was a taskmaster.
Hello and welcome to FranklinCovey on Leadership. I'm your host, Will Hodling. Today's guest is Julie Zhuo. Julie joined Facebook in 2006 when the company was roughly 100 employees. While at Facebook, she grew from individual contributor to manager to ultimately VP of product design. She shared her hard-earned insights in a book, The Making of a Manager, What to Do When Everyone Looks to You, which became a bestseller. In today's conversation, we'll discuss the lessons learned from Facebook's growth, the keys to being a great manager and leader, her life as a startup founder post-Facebook, and much more. Julie Zhuo, welcome to FranklinCovey on Leadership.
Hi, Will. It's great to be here.
Absolutely. Really excited for today's conversation. So you graduated from Stanford back in 2006. You originally were joining Facebook as an intern, and then you joined full-time as your first job. I think at that point, Facebook was kind of in the post-social network movie era, and then it was more than 10 people in a house in Menlo, but it was, I think, around 100 employees. It's now grown to be 70, 80,000 employees. I would love to hear, in your Facebook era, what lesson did you learn that shaped the leader that you became? And then what lesson have you had to unlearn?
It's a great question. I think the most important thing that I learned from my journey at Facebook is the idea that we can always grow and be better. And we can do so in a way that isn't punitive, that's not like because we're not good enough. But part of the joy, in fact, of a career is the fact that we get to go on, I think about like it as an adventure. I'm on this adventure. I'm going to learn new things as I go along it. There probably will never be a day in which I know it all. And I think that that was one of the most important lessons of being at a hyperscale company. I felt like as soon as I got a little bit comfortable in whatever it was I was doing, right? So as you mentioned, I started as an intern. I was an engineering intern. Within the first year, I sort of started to explore design, and I felt like a ton of imposter syndrome about being a designer because I wasn't formally trained there. So then, the story goes, you try some things, you learn some things, you get a little more comfortable. Oh no, but like the story changes again. Suddenly I am given the opportunity to manage. I have no idea how to do that. Same whole thing, feel like a total imposter. Start to do the job a little bit, start to get, advice, mentorship, et cetera, from books, other people, get better at it. The company scales again, now I'm managing managers. And so all of these chapters, when I think about my journey at Facebook, taught me that, hey, it's okay if I don't know something right away, as long as I care and as long as I'm willing to be wrong and I'm able to put in the effort and the work, and I'll get better, right? And that's kind of the metric that I think that's the most important thing that I took away, is that no matter what, I have a little bit more conviction now that whatever I put my mind to, like you go through the same emotions and we'll get somewhere exciting on the other end.
I think learning that growth mindset early is really powerful. It gives you the confidence to explore new challenges over the course of your career and over the course of your life, not just career. As you moved from one role to the next, from IC to manager, going to buddy to boss transition, I'm sure you became the manager to a lot of people that you used to go out to drinks with and hang out with on weekends and whatnot. As you've made the transition, where did you learn How much was learning by doing? How much was learning from mentors and advisors? How much was learning from reading books? What was your growth path like?
I think I was very fortunate to be able to learn by doing. I think that probably is the way that I learn best. I think it's probably how most people learn. There's really no shortcut for the fact that you have to go through certain experiences and deal with the fact that these things are quite emotional, especially management. I write about this in my book as well, but often, let's say you were trying to learn how to become a better artist. Well, you can go home and you can draw a lot of pictures and you can practice on your own time and put in the hours. And if you do that, let's say the person put in more hours than the other, we would expect that that person might have a steeper learning trajectory. I think with management, because it's so people oriented, you can't often recreate these sorts of situations for yourself. I have two people on my team, and let's say they're not getting along. There's something very unique about the fact that these are two specific individuals. They have a particular dynamic. It's in a particular context. And that's not the kind of thing where I can just go home and repeat that and go through the reps of that. Sometimes you have to just be in the situation to learn what it's like in that particular dynamic. And certainly as you put in more and more of these experiences, you start to maybe observe patterns and you can build your own frameworks. But the thing that I've always felt was challenging and also exhilarating about management is that it has to do with people, and people are just about the most complex things in this universe. So having to do it, right? Like you just can't go and practice how to fire somebody, and have a difficult career conversation unless it's there in front of you and you're looking at that person in the eye and you understand and you're holding on to the emotional charge of that.
I started my career at Google, and Google was famous for a lot of unorthodox leadership practices. I think in the early days of Google, you would have 100 direct reports for a single engineering leader. What were the unorthodox leadership lessons of Facebook, now Meta? And which of those do you think contributed to success? And in which ways did they succeed despite, not because of, those unorthodox lessons?
I think that Meta was really excellent in its management practices. I think that earlier on there was a lot of investment in people, and to this day, I think about my journey there at Facebook. I think my favorite thing is the people and the relationships and the investment in it. One of the things that I thought was very important and worked very well was this idea that feedback is a gift, and you'd see this in posters all around campus. Feedback is a gift, and I think about this in the back of my head, practically every single day, or at least multiple times a week. And I think what talking about this idea that feedback is a gift gave us is that yes, it can be hard. Yes, ideally I'd like to go in and have everyone just tell me what a wonderful person I am and how awesome of a job I did, and I'm the greatest gift that this place has ever known. That would feel nice, for my ego. But if that were the case and that's all I heard, there's really no opportunity for me to learn or get better or to be like a person in progress, which is what I think of myself as. And so going back to what I mentioned, taking away this growth mindset, that the ability to learn is the most important thing, feedback is so critical because it's our calibration with reality. It's my ability to say, hey, I'm trying to do this thing. I want to get better at it, but why, can I invite other people to tell me how I'm really doing and what I might need to pay attention to. And it helps me calibrate myself so that I can learn and grow. And it took a while for me to not be so upset when somebody would criticize or give me something that I wasn't doing very well. But the more that I was able to see that actually ultimately over time this helped me get better. And sometimes it took me years to realize that, hey, this thing that this person said, even if they said it in kind of like a rude manner, now years later when the emotional charge is gone, I realized that it was useful. They said something to me about where I was deficient, and it turned out that there was something I could learn from that and use it to further myself in where I wanted to go.
What was the most powerful feedback you got in that early Facebook era as you were transitioning from IC to manager?
I think one of the most important pieces of feedback I have ever received as a manager, which I also still think about to this day, came from one of my reports. We were working on a project together and it was very stressful. And it was a top CEO company mandate. And we were having reviews almost on the daily. And I was talking to him about the work. And, I think I had this tone, I had this attitude of hey, we got to do better. We got to do this or that. And he stopped me and said, Julie, I know that you care a lot about this project, and I also know that's very stressful for all of us. But sometimes I feel that, when things are good, you're on my side, you're supporting me. But when things are not going well, I don't feel like you're on my side. I don't feel that you're the kind of person who is there for me. And he expressed this sentiment to me, which really made me pause and actually reflect much more on, like, wait, what is my job here as a manager? And what I realized is that it's not really the kind of manager that I want to be. We all know that obviously results matter. And part of the job is like you want to get great results from the team. But I didn't want to do it in a way where the people I was supporting felt like I was a taskmaster and that I wasn't actually, somebody that felt like I could root for their success or support them in their time of need. And that conversation still plays in my mind. It still sticks with me because it reminds me of like what my value is and how I want to manage. And it makes me realize that like actually they don't have to be in conflict. I can, of course, want great things and desire for great performance for my team, but it doesn't have to come at the cost of making people feel like I'm not on their side. So it was tremendously impactful for me and really helped me reframe my whole perspective on the role.
Yeah, it's really powerful and helpful feedback. One of our most popular solutions at FranklinCovey is 6 critical practices for leading a team. And in it, we share this mindset around the importance of expecting a lot and caring a lot, that the best managers, the best leaders have high performance expectations for their team, but also care deeply about the individual. And in our research, we found that only 7% of managers and leaders fall into that quadrant of expecting a lot and caring a lot.
Yeah.
Why do you think it's so hard? A lot of people, I think, if you follow FranklinCovey or if you read Radical Candor, kind of know about this combination of expect a lot and care a lot, but it's harder to actually implement that. Why do you think that is? Or maybe people don't know, and maybe I'm biased because I sit in this industry and think about it all the time.
No, I agree with you. I think it's a tough thing. It's tough to hold both these ideas because I think they feel contradictory in a lot of ways, right? It feels like, hey, if I care about you, then I'm going to be nice to you and I'm going to say things that are going to make you feel good and that you're not going to be upset that I said them. And I think what happens is that we can confuse niceness for kindness. So in my mind, again, the way that I define it, niceness is like it's surface level. It's like I'm not putting you in an uncomfortable situation. But kindness is actually thinking about what will help you in the long arc of your career? What will help you be the kind of person that you want to be? And sometimes that might mean saying something that's a little bit uncomfortable. Maybe you don't want to hear it in the moment, but I'm doing it because I care about that longer arc, right? Not just like the surface interaction. And so I think it's easy to mistake, okay, wait, me being kind or caring must mean that I can never say something that makes you uncomfortable, which I don't think is true. But I think the other thing is also true, which is that sometimes people are like, well, we see movies and we sometimes look at these managers and they seem to be like real, like taskmasters, like you're gonna get fired. Like it's this operating from fear rather than from trust. And because we see that it goes back to like, I think these things can work in the short term. If you tell someone, hey, if you don't get this to me by tomorrow, like you're going to lose your job, probably does have a short-term effect where they might burn the midnight oil, but it goes back to like you're probably eroding and making the long-term performance and the long-term ability for you and that person or the whole team to do better work. You're probably putting that at jeopardy with this, short-term. So I think it's hard for us because we sometimes confuse like what might feel good right now or what we need right now with what will work in the longer arc of like, 6 months, a year, 5 years, 10 years. And these things have to be kept in balance.
Absolutely. I think that I love the Brene Brown line, clear as kind, which I think is, talking about kindness versus niceness. And then one of the leadership maxims, it's more important to be respected than it is to be liked. And that we often bias towards what's going to help us be liked in the short term. We avoid difficult conversations. We avoid performance feedback, et cetera. But I think in the end, you need to balance. We talk a lot about the balance of courage and consideration. Mm-hmm. So I'm totally in agreement here. So now I want to talk about your book. You wrote a book, Making of a Manager, best-selling book. I know it's really a touchstone for a lot of people in tech and outside of tech about how to become a manager. A lot of people move from IC to manager and go through that experience. You went through that experience and then you felt compelled to write a full book about it. So talk to me, why did you decide to write this book?
I did actually have this idea for a long time because in my mind, you should write a book when you become an expert in the topic. And again, we look at business books and we look at the fact that they're often written by people at the caps, like they've had an amazing career. Now they're, either retiring soon or they're trying to like figure out how to share everything that they learned and give it to the next generation. So maybe that's the mental model that I had in mind. It wasn't until I started just blogging online about whatever I was going through. And the way I think about my writing online is that I'm kind of like writing letters to myself. I'm writing the thing that I need to hear and again, trying to sort through, whatever issue that I might be having. So I'd have a blog post about recruiting because that was top of mind. And then I would write myself this letter of like, okay, remember, do this, this, this. And a lot of that writing started to get a following. And it was actually, some of the readers who suggested that I think about putting all of these together into a book. And what that made me realize is that sometimes it is very helpful to hear it from someone who's kind of just going through the same thing. Yes, there is obviously also a huge amount of value to hear it from someone who's been there, done that, and like, looking back on all of the things that they learned. But sometimes there's an immediacy as well to hearing from someone who might be like, just slightly ahead of you. Like maybe you're a new manager, and maybe for me at that point, I had just managed for some number of years, right? But I still remember, I still remember all of the challenges, what it's like, as I mentioned, the emotional beats of thinking like I'm going to have a difficult conversation and not knowing what to do. So I'm like go in front of my mirror and I'm, trying to practice this conversation and feeling just so nervous about that. And I think that that's what a lot of readers gravitated with, is that it felt like very real and it felt very immediate. And so that's what compelled me to actually try to put all of that together in a book so that it can really be there for the first time manager, because I still really do remember, again, it's getting farther and farther for me now, but like the fact that being new and you can read all the books that you want, but it goes back to, it doesn't make it somehow immediately like, oh yeah, I know how to do this. Like you still have to go through it.
Yeah, I think that a lot of business and leadership books are written by people, as you were saying, that are on the end of their career and they're kind of writing back, thinking about their experiences over time. And I think what so many of us crave is that kind of upperclassmen. Remember when you're a freshman in college and you're new and you're scared and you like get a junior or a senior who can tell you these are the courses to take, these are the clubs to avoid, these are the parties to go to and not go to, et cetera. And I think that's what resonated so much when I read your book. I was, going through that buddy to boss transition myself, and it felt like, oh wow, I found like a wise older cousin instead of I found a kind of sage at the end of their career.
Yeah, I love
so
that.
I think your mindset there
Yeah.
resonates.
That's exactly what I wanted. I wanted to feel like we were having coffee, like we were just sharing experiences.
Absolutely. So I want to talk about a couple of the insights from your book that have definitely stuck with me and I think will be helpful for our listeners. The first is the mindset shift from doer to leader, and that it's not about your performance, it's about the performance of your team. Talk me through that mindset shift, and maybe is there a personal experience or story from your time at Facebook that brings that to life?
Absolutely. So a lot of times, when you're an individual contributor, a lot of how you think about and what you get rewarded on is how much you were able to do yourself. And so that's, again, the success mental model is like, okay, if I'm going to go and get better in my career, that should mean that I'm somehow more productive. Like I can personally solve more problems. Like I've come up with the right answer more and more of the time. But the transition to management is really interesting because I go back to like the definition of a manager is not that you're the person who comes up with all of the best ideas. It's that your team is able to do better work all together. And so instead of thinking about yourself as like, I'm adding ideas, I'm adding solutions, I'm adding this or that, it's like, you have to think about yourself as, how do I become this multiplicative factor? Like, how do I get more out of all of us who are on the team, right? And obviously the larger the team, the smaller your ability to contribute as a human is, with the collective human hours of what a group of 5 people, 8 people, 10 or 50 people can contribute. And so that goes back to, it's a very different mindset shift because it comes down to like basically 3 major ingredients that the manager has in terms of their levers that are multiplicative levers. The first is people. Like how many amazing, talented people can I have? Because each one of them multiplies the impact of the team. And similarly, it's not just about hiring people, it's also about making sure that people are doing their best work. So the people that we have, how do we help them become more effective? I think the second thing is process. So I think about process as how do people work together? What does great collaboration look like? How do decisions get made among this group of people? Again, it does not scale if the answer is I make all the decisions, because you just won't be able to as the size of the team increases. And then the third thing is just purpose, and the shared sense of like, are we marching in the same direction? Do we collectively as a team understand what greatness for our team looks like? And if you have smart people and maybe they do know how to interact or communicate, make decisions, but they're all going at cross purposes because they all have like something different that they're optimizing for, then the team also will not work. And so I think about this as like, imagine this is an orchestra, this is a symphony, and you're trying to have everyone create beautiful music. It's really not just about you being an instrument player and that's going to be what gets everyone to, have a beautiful symphony. It's really more about the interplay of people. And that means that, we need to stop judging ourselves as managers on like, how many decisions did I make? How many, like X things did I produce? And it's more about, again, the collective efforts of the team.
From AI to economic uncertainty, disruption has exposed a seismic leadership gap. FranklinCovey's guide, Where Are All the Great Leaders?, helps organizations bridge the gap with practical steps to strengthen agility, trust, and strategic vision. Grab your free copy from the show notes to build your future-ready leadership playbook. One of the other topics in the book that you cover that I think is great is the importance of clarity. Kind of clarity over intensity and clarity of expectation setting and vision. What's a practical exercise the leader can go through to understand if they've created appropriate clarity on their team?
What I like to do, just to even gut check whether there's clarity, is I like to go to each person and say, hey, what is for the next 3 months, what does success for you and what does success for our team look like? And if the success for the team answer is the same, then great. We have some clarity. If the answer is all very, very different and everyone's got like a slightly different answer, that's when I know that I have a problem. I think another practical exercise that's quite useful is kind of thinking about like, there's different, I think about kind of like, this is a really, I think, helpful exercise for me in thinking about one-on-ones and how to create clarity with people that I am working with and on my team. And it's kind of thinking about like, okay, what is the greater work that we're all trying to work towards? Like what's important right now for the company? What's important right now for our team? And why does what we do connect to what's important for the company, right? So there needs to be like a kind of, if our team is working on task A, like, well, task A is useful for project X, and project X is useful for like team initiative Y. And team initiative Y is important because it somehow connects to the overall mission or charter of what the company is trying to do. And if every single person knows what all those hops are and kind of tells that same story, then we're going to be in a much better place. And I think there's another thing, which is like, what's the circle of the person that I'm talking to, right? Because, every single individual is different. Everyone is perhaps working on a different task within a different project. And not to mention, they've got different strengths and weaknesses, but their superpowers, I like to think about. What is their superpower? And the other part that I want to connect is like, well, what is it that's, unique about what they're really good at and what they want to learn and be better at? And what is the intersection of that with the projects that are important right now for our company? And so being able to do this for every single person on our team ensures that, I can find and can make sure each person is doing the thing that is that makes the most sense, that kind of maximizes the space of overlap where they're working on the thing that is really important, but it also allows them to do what they do best and move in a direction where they want to grow and they will find engaging.
Wonderful. So I want to now move to a game. We're going to play a game. There's a lot of leadership maxims, advice, kind of well-known sayings. And I want to play a game called Love It or Leave It. And I'll maybe give you a third option: love it, leave it, or edit it. And I'm going to share a few different leadership maxims, and I want to get your feedback on them. So the first one, you talked about recruiting earlier, is hire slow, fire fast.
Love it. Love it in most contexts. Again, my answer to all of your questions is probably going to be it depends, because there will be a context in which that makes sense, and there will likely be a context in which that doesn't make sense. But the reason why I gravitated more towards love it is I think when you think about a person, adding a person to your team, you really do want to get to know that person. You want to get to know that person, their goals, and you want to make sure that it goes back to like there's a good overlap between what that person is good at and what they care about and what you and your team and what your goals are. And I think if you are able to have that conversation earlier and you're able to get to know each other, it just makes like after they join, it's going to be a good fit. It's much more likely it's going to be a good fit because it is so expensive to hire somebody and to have it not work out. It causes like a ton of ripple effects. Often if you hire the wrong person, they're unhappy. You obviously you want to like I think most of us like will want to try and make it work. So even going back to the maxim of hiring fast is great, but it goes back to you can only do that well if um, if if you have clarity about like what you need and what this person needs.
You talked about feedback a bunch already. I think a popular feedback maxim is to praise in public and critique in private.
Again, in most situations, I think that's probably good advice. I think that if things are going well, it is really important to make sure that people understand that they're valued and that they were a huge part of it. I think probably a better maxim I like is like, if you're the leader, don't make it about you and what you did, right? If like anything happens that someone praises you for, see if you can try and pass that along or give credit to the people on your team who did that work. I do think that leaders should ideally lead. I love the book, the phrase of like leaders eat last, right? You want to take care of your team and you want to make sure that like you get a lot of visibility as a leader. It's probably more important to make sure that the people who don't get as much visibility can have so. So I do think that that's really important. I think with critique, this goes back to, I think it's very important that that can be shared directly with that person. I think there's also instances in which, it's important that everyone gets to hear that because it goes back to like us understanding and learning as a team about what good looks like or what great looks like and how we learn from mistakes. So I think you can take that too far and you can get to a point where like, oh, we can never say anything bad about anyone or and like, but no, like it just needs to be blameless. Like we can recognize that like we did this thing or somebody did this thing and that's not great. We can do that without blaming the individual. I think that's an important element.
My final maxim is one that's going to hit close to your professional experience, which is move fast and break things. So that was the Facebook kind of cultural ethos.
It depends. It so depends. I think it worked well for us at Facebook in the earlier days because of a couple properties. The first is that we were a social network, and a lot of the value of a network comes from the fact that there are other people on it. So really, if you thought about like what was going to make a social network product like ours more valuable, it's not because we shipped like way more features. It's mostly because your friends are on it, your family is on it, the people you care about is on it. And so the let's move quickly was a ethos that came from being a particular type of company with this property. Now, if I'm building equipment, medical equipment that's going to help surgeons, do complex surgeries, I do not want the ethos of that.
It depends on what we're breaking.
To
yeah.
be moving quickly and breaking things, right? So we've got to look at like, does it make sense for the context of the problem? It goes back to also, by the way, if you're building a social media app and look, there's a bug from here to there, like the video doesn't play, it's not the end of the world. Like people can be forgiving, these things happen. But if you're building like flight software for airplanes landing and taking off, like you don't want any mistakes, like it's not okay. And so very different cultures are needed for these different types of problems.
Speaking of different cultures, I want to transition from your past to your present. So you're now the co-founder of Sundial, which is a product analytics startup. How is your leadership as a startup founder notably different from how you led when you were VP at a large company?
So one of the key things, going back to move fast and break things, is we have to move much faster. As a startup, one of the key advantages, right? Because look, going to compete with other many big companies. They have a lot more people, they have a lot more money, but they have to be a little bit more thoughtful. For them, they're maybe playing to not lose because you're already winning, right? So you're already dominant, you have a lot of customers. It's more expensive for you to make a mistake. And so you probably need to have a lot of meetings and make sure that like everything is thoughtful before you proceed. I think the context of a startup is like, look, you're default dead until you make something happen. And the only key advantage that you have is that you're faster, you can be more nimble, you can try and take bigger risks and take bigger swings, whether it's a technology swing or whether it's, people or whatever it is. And so that's probably one of the biggest, again, it goes back to because the context is different, being a startup really pushed me to be a lot more decisive, to try and move things forward, to pivot when more quickly when there's new information that came in, to try things that may not scale because we needed to be a lot more experimental and we needed to get out there in the market and to try to do things much faster, because that's one of the things that we can go back to our customers is they say we want the solution, nobody else is providing it, they talk to all these other companies, maybe it'll get on a roadmap and it'll be out like a year. If we can try to deliver that faster, that is the edge and that's the advantage that we have.
Yeah, I totally, that feedback, that comment definitely resonates. I went from working at Google YouTube to my own startup and also went through that adjustment on trying to ship as quickly as possible in this new era. So I think it's illegal to have a podcast episode if you don't bring up AI, and we've managed to get almost 30 minutes without me saying those two letters. So I'm curious how you think leaders can encourage intelligent AI adoption in their organizations.
I think that we all need to be experimental. AI is one of those areas. So maybe a couple of different things, right? It's so new and we all know it's quite transformative. It's like the next leap in technology. And so I think that there's also this kind of high level, like, yeah, we should learn to use this. But again, because it's so new, I don't think that there's like playbooks out there. And so there's no like, okay, this is how you use AI responsibly. I think that the ethos we need to have is that we need to actually all try things, and we need to try things for our organization, for our teams, and again, in the context that we are in. But the most important thing is to be okay experimenting and trying. And that means, trying different models, trying different workflows, having people maybe prototype and experiment more with using AI to do something. So going back to like, yes, maybe we had this way of doing things and that served us well. That's to me the most dangerous thing, is to assume that because it served us and that's the way that we did things, that should be the way that we continue doing things. I think a better mentality is to just say, hey, look, that's how we were doing things, but is there a better way? Can we use this technology in a way that helps us actually move more towards the future? And I think the companies that are able to hold less tightly to like tradition and the way that it's always been and the processes of the past, and more able to embrace that, hey, this has changed. We're changing. It's in an uncertain world. No one has the answers. The best we can do is just try some things and learn and reflect, and then little by little work our way towards what will help us. I think the second point that is also really salient right now is that the uncertainty is also an important, I think, emotional beat that many, many teams and many people are grappling with. I do think there's a lot of fear right now about what will this mean for my job in the future. I think managers and leaders are having to reckon with the fact that, look, nobody has confidence or conviction. Like, no, anybody who says like, I know exactly where this technology is going to be in 3 months or in 18 months. I mean, there's like equally enough people who are as expert who would say the opposite. And so I think that because it is uncertain, leaders also have to be okay with the fact that there's going to be fear and there's going to be, some resistance. And I think in those times, acknowledging it is really important, right? Let's not pretend like we all know the answer. Like we're all going to try and figure it out. And so acknowledging that there is uncertainty, and acknowledging that maybe the only thing we can do with uncertainty is put one foot in front of the other, try some things and figure that out.
I think that I love how you talk about the importance of experimentation, and that many leaders with AI adoption have taken a more hands-off approach. So we have a new solution working and leading with AI. And in it, we did a bunch of research beforehand and found that 80% of managers are actually hands-off on AI adoption. And I think the right mindset is to be proactive and encouraging experimentation. So not prescriptive on what solution is, but prescriptive that people do proactively experiment. So I think that's Your point there definitely resonates. So I want to move us before our final closing question. I want to move to a quick lightning round. We've talked today exclusively about leadership and management, but you're also a design expert. You were a product design leader at Facebook for a long time, now Meta. And so first lightning round question for you. What is the best designed physical product that you use regularly?
That is really hard. Right now, what I will say I quite love is my Aura Ring. I am somebody who, as you know, loves data because I also work on a data startup. And health has become something that's very important to me, right? Being able to know that I'm sleeping well, exercising well. What I love about the Aura Ring is that it's just a really easy form factor. It goes on the ring. I think it's quite elegant. It helps me understand and really be able to reflect on, am I sleeping well enough? Am I getting enough rest? Am I too stressed, or am I actually having time where, again, my physiological signals like HRV can help me understand that I'm relaxing? So I find that to just be quite transformative in the way that I've been able to reflect more on like overall health.
What about a very well designed or the best designed software product that you use regularly?
I find that the best software tends to be almost like invisible. Maybe again, there's many pieces of software that I quite enjoy. One plug that I'll share is I quite have loved Granola, and it's a tool that automatically takes notes for me. So I do a lot of Zoom calls, and it's just one of the things I think works so well is that it seamlessly works. So I don't have to think about, okay, let me open this thing, let me get this all ready, let me invite it to the meeting. It's just sort of there, and it helps me just keep track of things. And I'm always so grateful because later, usually if I have to share a piece of context about the meeting with someone, like invisible software that just takes care of something and otherwise saves me manual work is one of the areas that I find very exciting. And I think AI actually enables a lot more of that.
Great. Final lightning round question is, if being a startup founder wasn't hard enough and being a writer, you also are a mom to three. So let's say your next book was about parenting. What would the title of your parenting bestseller be?
Probably Share Your Feelings.
Great.
Yeah. I think that and maybe this relates to our conversation about AI. I do think that, look, the technology is here and has been for the past couple of decades, which have really competed with humans on the cognitive front, right? So calculators started to do math problems faster and more accurately than humans did. And then, the internet is like Wikipedia came along, was like just the internet had like more knowledge. And now AI is like, sort of elevating that to a level where it's even far more personalized and can solve many more problems, or in some cases like code as well as, a junior engineer, and again, do it much faster. So I do think a lot of the like what makes us human, like, okay, yes, there's the fact that we're smart and we're good at problem solving, but technology is getting better and better at that. So then that can't be it. That's not the only reason that, we're valuable. I think the second thing is that, we feel these very human things, and we have feelings. We experience joy and love and sadness and grief. And I think that that's beautiful and that's important. And even as technology can come and take other elements of our cognitive, elements of trying to make the world better, I think it's not going to replace the fact that we still are what we are and that we desire to connect. And so much of connection is acknowledging that these things are important. And so I'm trying to raise my kids in a way that they, maybe you can say, can be attuned to their humanity. And I never want them to forget that.
Lovely. All right. Well, I've got my Amazon pre-order ready. Just tell me when it's coming out and I'll hit the button. So our closing question is always, we're a leadership company, interested in a leader who has greatly influenced you and what lesson you've learned from them.
I really love the book Conscious Business. And I think that the book and the author have been really tremendous in my own journey. The reason that I love that philosophy, and Conscious Business is a leadership book, and what is quite unique about it is that it really speaks to the work that we do in our careers as kind of like a spiritual, almost like personal transcendental journey, that these don't have to be different elements. Not like work is just work, we're doing it for the money, but how do you think about work as a kind of purpose? How do you think about the values that you have, and how do you express that through work? And I know that when I read that book, it was like the first time I felt like I don't know, there was a business book that was able to weave these other elements that were very important in my life together. And so, yeah, very, very grateful for that book and the impact that's had on me.
Wonderful. It is rare that people reference leadership books that I have not heard of, but that is a new one for me. So you've got something to add to my reading list. So thank you so much for the time, for the insights, for the lessons shared, both on your writing over time, your book, and then in our conversation today. I hope that, and I trust that our listeners have enjoyed the conversation as much as I have.
Thank you so much, Will. It's so fun to be able to do this with you.
Wonderful. So thank you to all of our listeners, and hope you join us next week for another episode of FranklinCovey on Leadership. Have a wonderful week.